Today, we will talk about cost-push inflation, when it occurs, definition, and causes. Cost-push inflation occurs when overall prices increase, inflation, due to increases in the cost of wages and raw materials. Higher costs of production can decrease the aggregate supply, the amount of total production, in the economy. Since the demand for goods hasn't changed, the price increases from production are passed on to consumers, creating cost-push inflation. Inflation is a measure of the rate of price increases in an economy for a basket of selected goods and services. Inflation can erode a consumer's purchasing power if wages haven't increased enough or kept up with rising prices. If a company's production costs rise, the company's executive management might try to pass the additional costs onto consumers by raising the prices for their products. As stated earlier, an increase in the cost of input goods used in manufacturing, such as raw materials. For example, if companies use copper in the manufacturing process and the price of the metal suddenly rises, companies might pass those increased costs on to their customers. Increased labor costs can create cost-push inflation, such as when mandatory wage increases for production employees due to an increase in the minimum wage per worker. Rising prices caused by consumers wanting more goods is called demand-pull inflation. Demand-pull inflation includes times when an increase in demand is so great that production can't keep up, which typically results in higher prices. In short, cost-push inflation is driven by supply costs while demand-pull inflation is driven by consumer demand, while both lead to higher prices passed on to consumers. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries is a cartel that consists of 13 member countries that both produce and export oil. In the early 1970s, due to geopolitical events, OPEC imposed an oil embargo on the United States and other countries. OPEC banned oil exports to targeted countries and also imposed oil production cuts. What followed was a supply shock and a quadrupling of the price of oil from approximately $3 to $12 per barrel. Cost-push inflation ensued since there was no increase in demand for the commodity. Inflation, or a general rise in prices, is thought to occur for several reasons, and the exact reasons are still debated by economists. Monetarist theories suggest that the money supply is the root of inflation, where more money in an economy leads to higher prices. Cost-push inflation theorizes that as costs to producers increase from things like rising wages, these higher costs are passed on to consumers. Demand-pull inflation takes the position that prices rise when aggregate demand exceeds the supply of available goods for sustained periods of time. In theory, a low amount of inflation can be a healthy sign of a growing economy. High inflation, however, can be damaging. Note that inflation isn't always bad for certain groups of people. For example, borrowers at fixed interest rates tend to benefit from inflation while lenders and savers are hurt by it. Here are 3 key takeaways. 1. Cost-push inflation occurs when overall prices increase, inflation, due to increases in the cost of wages and raw materials. 2. Cost-push inflation can occur when higher costs of production decrease the aggregate supply, the amount of total production, in the economy. 3. Since the demand for goods hasn't changed, the price increases from production are passed on to consumers, creating cost-push inflation. Hope this would help. Thanks for watching.